earlier we heard from the Rough Boys via REO Speedwagon, so now we're going to hear from the Tough Boys, Tough Boys and the Rough Boys, and now we're going to hear from the Soft Boys. So, Josh, I just made that up on the fly, too, guys. I didn't script that one. It just came to my head.
I'll do the numbers here first. So this comes at Underwater Moonlight by the Soft Boys comes in at number 262 in the 1980s on Best Ever Albums, number 36 in 1980, number 1,664 of all time. It is the Soft Boys' highest rated album on Best Ever Albums. Did make Rolling Stone. My guess is this is a 1001 album we need to hear before we die.
Correct. Yep, this one's from that.
Because you didn't know them, did you, John?
I did not know.
Okay.
So this one came directly from that list.
I did not know them either, and I am so glad we listened to this album. I freaking love this album. It is like everything I want in pop music. This is like the opposite end of where REO Speedwagon is in my mind for pop music. I can hear like all of the stuff that we've listened to in this done in like this infectious way, like from the Beatles to the Kinks to other garage rock to it's like this exquisite blend of Britpop that carries through later on to like Oasis and also kind of like Weezer in a way, even though they're not British. And I felt like every song on this album was good. I can hear like 90s rock in this as well, on something like the first song, I Want to Destroy You. They kind of have this Monkees-esque vibe to them as well on something like Kingdom of Love. They're just really well-written pop songs that pull all of these different sounds and things that we've listened to and that I like and make them their own, but like with one step in the past and one step in the present. In some way, Positive Vibrations has kind of this Indian inflected or Eastern tone, which kind of harkens back to the Beatles as well, and some other bands that we've talked about. They've got some blues guitar riffs on here, but then they kind of transition. Like on I Got the Hots, kind of has this blues start to it, but then it transitions almost into like a Kinks song. I hear the Velvet Underground on here, like an Insanely Jealous, which is why I chose it for the montage. And they got cowbell on a song like Old Pervert, which I love cowbell. The guitar is great on this. I feel like they're singing. Is Robin Hitchcock the lead singer on this, or is he? See, this is why we don't. My hot take is I like the singing. That's my
Robin
hot take.
Hitchcock is vocals. Yes.
Okay.
Vocals, he's also listed at Kimberly Rue is also listed as on the vocals.
Okay. This is just kind of this perfect blend for me of pop music done well, in the same way also that what's his face, Adam
Schlesinger.
Yes, thank you. Writes pop songs. I feel like this is kind of lineage to that style of writing as well, and song structure. And it was just
Fountains of Wayne. We should probably mention for people that are trying.
Well, that's Adam Schlesinger's from Fountains of Wayne. Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. Just for those that may be listening who don't know. Yeah,
it's all of a piece, and for a band that I've never heard of, I feel like so many other bands that I do like later on probably listen to this album or know of it, and it's kind of one of those things too where it's a missing piece for me in kind of like musical history for me, or things that I appreciate. I feel like it's just a hidden gem, and I really liked it.
Yeah, this is right up my alley.
Yeah.
This is from the opening notes of I Want to Destroy You, I was like, what the hell is this? This is not what I was expecting. I thought we were probably going to get like another post-punk album, because it seemed like that was the underground.
Or some like weird synth Joy Division.
Yeah, right. Offshoot. Like just, so my initial take was like, this is from 1980. This sounds like it's from like 1968. Part of this is because this is Kinks, or not the Kinks. This is the Byrds. It's just like the Byrds is all over this for me.
That's what
guitar.
I said. Yeah, Josh hated the Byrds, so it's fascinating. He loved this because I'm like, Jesus, this is the Byrds.
Yeah, this is
Byrds
probably
are like slightly folkier, I think, and that's kind of where that doesn't come in.
I don't know, man. There's a lot of Byrds.
Yeah, I mean, Queen of Eyes.
Yeah. It's like a Byrd song.
Come on,
that's a Byrd song. Yeah.
You know what? I listened to that later this week, and that opening guitar part of Queen of Eyes, I was like, now that also sounds like that sounds like an intro of a Springsteen song. Yeah. And then that made me go, yeah, but it's definitely the Byrds. And then I go, well, that's Bruce Springsteen being influenced by the Byrds. That's where that sounds
which we talked about back in the day.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I also like that it's not just songs like Queen of Eyes or I Want to Destroy You, that really upbeat pop music. And you're right, Josh. This is definitely that's definitely got like a 90s, kind of vibe to it. It's equal parts like 60s, kind of like psychedelic rock and Byrds type rock, but also 90s power pop, like Matthew Sweet, that type of thing, But then you got a song like, and props to Sherry on this, I Got the Hots. Sherry's like, that sounds like Iggy Pop. And I was like, yes, it does. Like that's that kind of like the little bit of a sludgier kind of Iggy Pop kind of, song there. I definitely heard the Velvet Underground. I definitely heard, it's got like the Monkees was good, Josh. And it's got the sitar. I think that's what you were talking about with, was it Positive Vibrations? And so I like how it kicks off with like some pretty big pop songs, first three songs, but then it kind of goes in a little bit of a different direction with I Got the Hots. I love the instrumental. The You'll Have to Go Sideways is a really cool, kind of a darker sounding, kind of guitar part that they're playing, but it's kind of got this infectious, repetitive, melodic structure going on there.
That's also Byrds-esque. There's like a country sound to it.
Yeah, it's that Rickenbacker. It's probably a Rickenbacker jangle guitar is what it sounds like, and Underwater Moonlight's a great. I stopped at track 10. That's Underwater Moonlight because that's where the album stops. But there was a re-release or whatever. There's 40 songs on this album in Spotify. So I thought that I was like, well, I'm going to have to go back and listen to more of this. But I wanted just to get the crux of the album itself. But yeah, this is a great find. This is a lot of the stuff that I love, and I think it is interesting because it's got a little bit in the past, it's a little bit in the future. Does not sound 80s. You would have played this record for me, there's no way I would have come up with like probably 3 decades before I would have said the 80s. So I really did like it. I'm definitely a big thumbs up on this. This is it's a good job on you, John, for I know you didn't know it, so it just turns out it's fortuitous that it was on that list. But also, fun fact, I don't know if you guys, I did a little bit of research on this. Kimberly Rue, because this band only lasted, I think they did one album after this, and only had like 2 or 3 albums. Kimberly Rue went on to form a band called Katrina and the Waves. And he wrote Walking on Sunshine, and then sadly one of the other guys passed away from COVID a couple years ago. R.I.P. to them. But yeah, great album. What a find.
Yeah, as I was listening to this, I was laughing. I was like, well, this is certainly up Matt and my alley. We like the same type of sound, but for different like I zeroed in on, certainly the first thing I thought was, well, shit, this is a Byrds album written in 1980. And then my second thing was, well, here's something that was operating in almost the same time as REM, with straight up jangle pop along the way. And I'm like, these guys had to have influenced REM. And sure enough, I looked it up, and they were REM loved them, which is one of the least shocking things in the history of the world. That, along with the fact that, there's other things that we're going to cover that have elements of, like, we haven't done Echo and the Bunnymen yet, but there was like a vibe I got from this for Echo and the Bunny, and it's got a little bit of a punk era. That's why it fits in post-punk so well. There's an energy to this that's very. That's the only thing that sounds like the late 70s, early 80s is sort of that punk energy. But yeah, you're right, Matt. There's parts of this that take it right into the 60s, and it's that Byrds sound, and George Harrison, right? The two Rickenbacker, sounds, I think, of the 60s, and the psychedelic part. That's all over this as well. There's a little bit of garage rock in here too, just in the way that psychedelic always had garage rock attached to it. That was
remember that Nuggets album we listened to was all like, it was psychedelic rock, but I'm like, it's as much garage rock as it is psychedelic, and then you realize that they really occupy the same lane.
13th Floor Elevators were another one that is a combination of that too. And then 80s indie rock and 90s indie rock as well. And now we've talked a lot about like bands we've listened to, so there's people who are listening to this and go, that's great, but like, what does this sound like? And the thing I would say that this sounds like is we've mentioned a lot of times, but that Rickenbacker jangle guitar is all over this. The bass lines that that indie rock bass line that kind of intrudes in. It's sometimes in the front and it's sometimes centered in the back, leading up to the chorus. It tends to run parallel with the chorus, the vocal chorus. That's kind of how I always describe what I call the indie rock bass line. That the bass line is running in concert with the vocals a lot of times, as opposed to chained to the drums or the lead guitar, as it is in other, harder rock or blues, right? This is, I find, you follow the bass line through the singer as opposed to following it through the bassist, the lead guitarist or the drummer. So those are hallmarks for me. There's, fills for the drums here, but simple fills that lead in usually at the end of the chorus. And a build up to the don't bore us, get to the chorus sort of effect to songwriting that I know Matt loves so much. So that's a little bit of the feel, but this one wedges very neatly into post-punk because it's post-punk. Just seems to me, the more we cover albums that are called post-punk, it seems like when you take garage rock mixed with surf rock mixed with sort of the sounds of the 60s and the early 70s, and then you bring the energy of the 70s and sort of like a less utopian view of the world, I think. Not dystopian, but a less utopian, a sort of a more cynical or realistic take, I would say. And to me, that seems to be what post-punk is, because it's a wide umbrella of what can be fit into it. And this is a good example. This doesn't necessarily sound like the industrial post-punk that we listen to that's more synthesizer heavy. This is definitely tied to 2 guitars, drums, and a vocalist. That tradition of music. And it's also tied a little bit into the response to the 60s and the 70s revival pop. I mean, while this doesn't sound exactly like Big Star or Badfinger, they're kind of operating the same lane, right? They're writing the pop songs. Pop songs within rock of their genre, and you guys mentioned a lot of like the 90s groups that tried to do the same thing.
Or like Replacements even too.
There's definitely, for sure. It's much cleaner than the Replacements are a little sloppier and, rough around the edges than this is. This is a little bit more curated, but there's definitely there's overlap and really what the Replacements were trying to do was be the 80s pop band. They just were so bad at, and I guess REM was who ended up doing that, right? They ended up occupying that lane to some degree, and they were often blended together, the Replacements and REM. It just was REM didn't have the vices the Replacements did, or the sort of the self-destructive streak. And the Soft Boys seem to not have a self-destructive streak as much as when they decided it was done, it's like, okay, we're done. We don't need to make any more albums, which is always fascinating to me that you make an album this good and you're like, you know what? Just not feel. And it shocks me, by the way, that this album is not more popular than it is. Isn't it? They haven't even had like a revival like, Big Star did, right? Where people are like, oh man, what a loss. Like they just kind of float to the point where 3 of us that listen to a shit ton of music and a shit ton of music that's influenced by this weren't able to pull these guys. Oh yeah, I was able to pull Pylon as an influence on REM before I was able to pull this, which is kind of remarkable. So, and it's an awesome album cover, by the way. I chuckle at the album cover, and it's kind of like the View of Romance that's on there. It's these 2 inflatable. It ties to some of the themes of the album as well.
Yeah, I'm starting to think that post-punk is one of my favorite musical genres, just flat out, It's like
because it's everything. It literally is everything.
Well, it's everything that's awesome and interesting, and just covering so many. It just covers so many things that I love, And this is a great find, man. This is kind of up there with a band like Pylon that we did recently, and.
Could you imagine if you discovered post-punk when you still had your CD racks, Matt? Forget it, throw it all out.
I would have been the coolest kid in college, man. I would have had all the great records.
You would have had to join Woodshop or something in high school and basically archive all these albums that you would have been buying.
That's what I want to do. I kind of want to put together a list of my favorite, the favorite acts I had zero idea about, before the podcast, and kind of rank them, because this is definitely would be on there. This is, this is. You're right. It's
just
crazy.
Take anything that's John's picks, and then just anyone that's identified as that. Yeah.
And the little things, right? Or the
pretty things.
Pretty things. Thank you. My brain's mush.
What?
But yeah.
When does post-punk end? I guess is now my question.
I think it's one of these things that it doesn't really mean anything and means everything at the same time. It's like, what's that concept in art? It's like both everything and nothing at the same time. It's I really wish I could pull that. I was smart enough to pull with that term, and I'll remember it at like 2 a.m. tonight. After
I just pulled up post-punk on Wikipedia. It says it started in the late 70s, and it doesn't say it ever ended. So maybe it's still going on. Josh.
Well, that's what I mean. Like you still hear stuff called post-punk to this day.
It just keeps going.
Because there's always something that's not it's kind of the same concept, Josh.
Yeah,
and that's why everything and their uncle can be thrown into it. It's like, well,
is it really like kind of like the original indie rock? Is that kind of like maybe a good way to
sort of and the original industrial rock, and let's throw in like, new romantic, and also while we're in here, let's throw in goth. Let's also throw it,
Yeah, it says stylistic origins are punk, avant-garde, dub, funk, electronic, krautrock, disco, art rock, free jazz, world glam,
like I said,
art pop. It's like everything. Yeah,
it's a pastiche of everything. Yeah, it's basically like good albums released after 1977.
Right.
Seems to be like
pretty
the general view. That were created mostly by white folks. That seems to be
that's fair.
Yeah, white folks created after 1977. That wasn't REO Speedwagon.
Yeah. AOR was not listed in one of the...
No, that's about the only thing that was operating as space outside of it was like AOR and metal. Those are the two things that were definitively not post-punk.
Yeah, definitely not regular radio airplay, but like a lot of college radio airplay, I imagine.
Yeah, which is coming, by the way, because this is the era of college.
Yeah, this is college rock, too. That's another... Yeah, that whatever that means, but yeah, for sure.
Well, that usually means like relatively affluent white people. When we talk, let's be very honest. That's what college rock was. It's kids back then. It's like who went to college and who went to college back then. Mostly rich white people, along with some smart kids on scholarship. That's kind of like what it was. Especially because you weren't really having I guess there were. I shouldn't say there were none, but it was also like out of like liberal arts or city schools, more so than big publics. Now there were some, so I don't want to overgeneralize, but
Well, they only had Soft Boys only had 3 albums. First one was Cannabis in '79, then this in 1980, Underwater Moonlight, and then they broke up, and then they came back in 2002 with Next Door Land. So there's
two albums.
We just talked about somebody recently that did that, didn't we? That was gone for a while and then came back. Was that like a week or two ago? Or something?
What's it called? The ones Kurt Cobain loved, the Raincoats.
Yeah,
did that. They were
it's Pylon. Pylon did that too.
Well, Pylon did too. Yeah,
right. That's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
I like that album's called Cannabis. That's a funny image.
Cannabis, yeah. Thumbs up. This is good stuff, man.
Yeah, this jumps to the top of my coldest not take rankings, I think.
Oh, damn.
That's very funny because I can't stress enough, and I think, Matt, you heard the same thing, God, this is a Byrds album. It was the first thing I thought. And Josh was notorious in the 60s for baffling me and you with his dislike of the Byrds. So I wonder if that was because at the time, Josh, you hadn't done the journey, and now if you went back and listened to those Byrds albums, it would click in the way that the Velvet Underground clicked for me.
Yep. Or I'm just a giant hypocrite. Who knows?
It could be.
That's more likely. We all know Josh as being a gigantic
man of contradictions.
hypocrite. That's right.
Yes.
Keep us on our toes, Josh.